Massive Darkness, a true solo variant that can play in just about an hour. Out of the box, Massive Darkness has some great components and some really interesting gameplay ideas, and those may be especially good if you have multiple players. But if you're trying to do a true solo with Massive Darkness, it can be a little bit confusing and challenging. When I first got Massive Darkness, one of the things that I thought would be most interesting were the class sheets, because you could customize each character the way you wanted. But during actual gameplay, it turned out that there was so much time spent trying to figure out, okay, if I've got a BAM, do I look on this card? Or maybe I've got a skill that has a BAM that's used, or maybe there's a shadow zone, or the special skill, or the signature skill, and I compare it to the skill of the enemy, and just going back and forth and trying to manage all of the different things became quite a challenge. Now, if you're playing with multiple players, that may give you something to do while you're waiting for your turn. But if you're doing a true solo mode, that can be overwhelming. So the version that I'm going to show here doesn't use the class sheets. It also doesn't do transmuting of weapons or leveling up. So what does it do? The focus of this version is to move relatively quickly through the dungeon to complete the scenario. Using the standard Massive Darkness rules, there can be a tendency for you to kind of get stuck in a region as monster after monster comes and attacks. So a big focus on this variant is movement, to be able to move through the dungeon and use these cool light and shadow zones, to use the cool dice and all their BAM and diamond effects, and to get used to the different skill levels that your different characters have. And one other point to mention, even though this is called Massive Darkness, this particular variant is not intended to have tons and tons of monsters coming after you, kind of like Zombicide. I am working on a variant that's like that, but this one is more like a standard dungeon crawl where you're interacting with monsters at a moderate level. Okay, so what are the differences with this variant? The main difference in this variant is how the combat works. You will use effects such as defense +1 shield. You'll also use the shadow effects and the special skills, but you won't use the BAM and diamond effects on the enemy or weapon cards. Instead, a diamond is always 2 unblockable wounds to the opponent, and a BAM is 1 unblockable wound. That applies both for the attack dice and for the defense dice. So in this particular case, if Owen is fighting the Goblin Warriors and he has 3 yellow dice and they have 3 blue and 1 green, and here is the roll. Well, Owen doesn't have any BAMs or diamonds, but the Goblin Warriors have 3 BAMs, and so they actually do an automatic 3 wounds to Owen. So in this sense, the combat is considered simultaneous. Now you may notice that that means that there can be quite a bit of damage done just in one turn. So instead of using the standard health, you will actually use XP to monitor your health or to track your health. You don't need to use the XP in the normal way because we're not doing that transmuting or using the skills. This also makes it easy to change the difficulty of the gameplay. So in this variant, what we have is if you want to just enjoy the experience, you can start with 20 XP. If you want it to be fairly easy, you can start with 15. A normal variant would have 10, and if you want it to be hard, you just have 5 experience or health. Along the lines of simultaneous combat, the enemy always gets their turn even if they were killed. So for example, let's assume that Owen has defeated the enemies here, and what we'll do is we'll just lay down the enemy to indicate that he has been defeated. However, when we come to the enemy phase, even if Owen has moved out, the enemy can continue to use their turn to attack Owen. Then once the enemy phase is completed, you can remove the enemy from the game board. Like regular Massive Darkness, you do need to kill all the minions before you kill the boss. However, unlike regular Massive Darkness, you don't have to kill them in 2 separate attacks. However, an attack cannot overflow to another group. So if I have more swords than necessary to defeat all the Goblin Warriors, the remaining or extra wounds or swords will not overflow to the Goblin Archers. Another modification is that heroes and enemies are able to freely move out of the zone of their opponent. So for example, if we have an archer, that archer can move away. The turns have been simplified as well. So each opponent, whether it be a hero or a monster, gets one turn each, and each turn consists of 2 actions. So an action can be a movement or an attack, and movement is 2 movement points. Now, once per turn, you can move one and attack. So, for example, in this particular case, if it's the hero's turn, they could move 1, 2 for their first action, and then they can move 1 and then attack. You can only attack the same opponent once per turn. So in this particular case, if it's the beginning of Sybil's turn, she can attack the Goblin Warriors once and the Orc Enforcers once. She cannot attack either one of them 2 times. So let's talk about opening doors. In this variant, you'll use the door cards just as you would for normal Massive Darkness, but you'll ignore the treasures. Instead, you'll distribute 3 special treasures and 5 regular treasures throughout the dungeon. You'll flip them over, mix them up, and distribute them how you'd like. Finding a regular treasure gives you 2 health points. Finding a special treasure allows you to get 1 weapon 2 levels up. You can save up treasures, so for example, if you don't need the health points right now, you can save the regular treasures to use when you do need them. Or on the other hand, you may want to save 2 special treasures to get a 2-handed weapon. In this variant of Massive Darkness, the hero starts fully equipped at the same level of the enemies. I suggest that you use level 3, but it can be any level, just so that the hero and the enemies are balanced. The special treasures do allow you to level up a weapon, and to do that you don't randomly draw a weapon. You decide which kind of weapon you want. So, for example, Owen, if he had a single special treasure, might want to upgrade his plate armor from a level 3 to level 5. And so what he would do is flip over the cards until he finds the next armor. Once he finds that armor, then he can just replace that the existing armor that he has and just return the rest of the cards back to the deck. In this variant, I've also created 3 special types of treasures. I've taken a regular treasure and drawn the no symbol on it. So this is kind of a null or no treasure kind of option. And then I put the word trap on another treasure. And a trap, if you flip that one over, is 2 unblockable wounds. The hero can get treasure through either an enemy dropping a treasure or through the special treasures. So reorganizing your weapons is free of no cost, but you can only reorganize your armor when you first get it. Picking up a weapon or opening a door costs 1 movement point. So let's talk a little bit about enemy movement. It's a little bit different because the enemies can move 2 instead of 1. So just like Massive Darkness, they try to attack, and if they can't, instead of moving 1, they actually move 2 in their normal direction. So in this case, the enemy would move here. And at that point, they try to attack again. So this enemy here, like we had talked about, you can take 1 more movement during an attack, so the enemy can move and then attack. If our hero was in this position and the enemy was in this starting zone, they would go move twice. They can't attack, but they see the hero and they can move twice again. So let's consider the situation where a hero is in a shadow zone. The enemy does not check every zone that they move, but only when they start movement and end movement. So at the beginning of the enemy's phase, this enemy cannot see any heroes. They can move 2, so he moves 2, and he passes by that hero even though the door was open. He checks again, he doesn't see a hero, and so he ends his turn right there. If, on the other hand, the enemy had started here, they try to attack, they can't, so they move 2, and then at the end here, they try to attack again. They do see the hero because the hero is in line of sight, so they can move 1 and attack. In this particular case, the hero is in a light area, The door is open, so the enemy tries to attack. They can't, so they move twice. They know where the hero is because they are in a light zone. They are able to target that hero, and so they do know where they are and can go a second movement. One, they cannot attack because they're melee, but they can move a second time. If an agent is killed during combat, they do get to have their final attack, but they don't spawn at the end of their turn. When an agent does spawn an enemy, they're spawned as close as possible to the middle zone of the current tile. Event cards. Event cards are only drawn at the event phase if there are no enemies on the board. In this variant, all of the enemies are spawned at the exit or as close to it as possible if a door is locked to the exit. Ignore event cards that are just about placing treasure, such as the God of Fortune's Blessing. The final thing that's added in this variant is a place of healing, and that's marked with, I use just the level token to mark it. A door is always open to that level, and when you get to that level, you can roll a red die once per action, so twice in a normal turn. And if you roll a BAM, you get 1/2 of your full health points. And if you roll a diamond, you get full health. So if you're playing on the normal mode that has a health of 10, a BAM would give you 5, and a diamond would give you 10, or just bring you up to full health. Having this place of healing on the board creates a lot of movement and can create the cat and mouse type of gameplay. So that's it for the simplified 1-hour true solo variant. I will create a couple of gameplay videos and actually walk through some of the scenarios using this gameplay to allow people to see what it's like. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you do too.